My guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Hank Quense. Now, Hank is an author who's literally done it all. 45 short stories, 12 novels, 15 nonfiction books, and decades of real-world publishing expertise. Nobody, I would suggest, is better qualified to talk about the topic that we are going to be going through today, which is AI as a writing assistant. Welcome to the show, Hank.
Thank you, Neil. It's great to have you here. Thank you. Looking forward to this.
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think we're all aware of AI. We're all aware of, the impact of writing correctly, either in business or personally, if we are an author or somebody who's just literally blogging for personal or business reasons. And this thing called AI suddenly arrives and it just potentially changes everything. I want to know, when did it arrive for you?
This happened to me about a year ago, the beginning of last year. I was between projects. I didn't have anything really to do. I was kind of bored. So I was looking for something new to learn. And I said, well, let me try to see what all the buzz is about this AI. So I tried it for a while and frankly, I was disappointed in it. And then I read an article that said the secret to using AI is how you write queries. And I was writing generic queries and I was getting generic answers, which, I already know all of this stuff. So I realized I had to start writing specific, detailed queries. And I started doing that and I was amazed at what I found. For instance, the first thing I did is I was fooling around and I said, what makes Ted Lasso a great character? And the answer stunned me. It was about 3 pages long, very detailed and very on topic. It had some insights in there that absolutely stunned me. So I said, this is pretty good. So let's try another experiment. I took a storyline from one of my published novels, about 200 words. I put it into the AI and I said, write a plot for this. And it did. It wasn't the plot of my story, of course, but I looked at it and I said, if I was writing a story from scratch now, I would definitely take 2 or 3 of the points in here and use it. And I said, this is pretty good stuff. So I started looking around and asking other authors. And the other authors either never heard of AI or didn't know anything about it, or 2, they knew about it and were terrorized by it. That was it. So I said, I got to write a book about this, and get these people on board that they can really use this stuff. It is really exciting. And that was the book I wrote, the AI Author's Toolkit. And I guess we linked up a little bit after that. So that's how I got here.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And I just love, Hank, your kind of initial approach to it, because I think a lot of people are almost, I guess, if you've made this your profession and then suddenly this robotic kind of machine thing sort of appears on the horizon and potentially if in the future it becomes something so powerful that literally anybody can be writing a novel or a piece of business content or whatever it is they're looking to do, then it really puts a pressure, I guess, on a whole industry. I mean, I certainly know the film industry is really, really, trying to figure out how can we reinvent ourselves? How can we continue to add value?
Yeah.
But it feels like you're kind of coming at this from a really positive mindset rather than sort of feeling the fear.
Yeah, it's the, one of the fears the writer has is this thing going to replace me? And the answer is yes, it will, if you let it. I don't let it. See, if you write put something into AI and it writes a short story for you, and you accept that as a finished draft and try and publish it, then yes, you have been replaced by AI. In my case, what I do with it, whatever it is that come out of the AI, that is a first draft, and it has to have significant revisions before it will be suitable for me to publish it in my voice. So that's the way I approach it anyway. It is very good. I mean, AI can write a hell of a press release. And that still needs some tinkering because I have some stuff in there that kind of made up, but it's really good at that, writing press releases, writing a query letter, outstanding. But it's, that has writing fiction it's a first draft. It is not a finished product. And you have to understand that if you accept it as a finished product, then, well, as a writer, you're doomed. You've been replaced by the AI.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I mean, if you kind of sort of think about this in very simple terms, is that AI as it kind of exists right now is a sum of all of the content that's ever been written, and what it's basically doing is it's regurgitating back in a slightly different format stuff that's already been created because it's learned from that content. So I'm guessing that as human beings, typically we are a sum of all of our learned experiences, if you think about this psychologically, and memories. But there is also something that we are bringing in, be it intuition or be it maybe an innovative kind of little spark of an idea that maybe comes to, as you would say, Hank, your second draft. You're going to bring in that sort of humanness to it because maybe the little idea that you're adding in as a special ingredient to a story or plot line has never been done before. Maybe it is absolutely unique. Do you see that, for the foreseeable future, that is going to be the difference between the human writer and the AI writer? Because obviously, AI's got a huge, vast resource to draw from, but it still has boundaries, doesn't it? It can't generate something original as such.
I view it as AI writes something. It's my job then to add creativity to it, because it's copying stuff that's already been done. I want to make it new. So I got to add my creativity to it in order to get that different than what has been done before. It doesn't come up with anything original. It doesn't know how to do that, but it's just regurgitating lots of stuff. It's very good. If you ask it questions, it'll answer it, and it'll do something like, I don't know. If I ask it a question, what I'm always amazed at is it comes up with points that I never would have thought of by myself. But it's still not creative. I got to add that element. Usually I have to add emotions to it also, because it's really flat and unemotional and uncreative. So those are the hurdles you have to get over by using your own writing skills.
I'm really interested. I mean, you're probably, well, I think almost certainly the most experienced author that I've probably ever spoken to. I mean, you have countless books, and countless sort of pieces of content and directions that you've taken your work. So, nobody probably for me has ever been more qualified to answer this one. But do you feel then that AI is going to either kind of dumb down writing as a human construct, or do you think it's going to bring people up to the next level? Because I'm really curious as to which side this is going to kind of really be attacking. So for the very best, most creative authors and writers, is it going to just almost bring them down a level or two? Or is it going to bring the rest of us mere mortals up to at least be able to kind of compete at that sort of level?
That's an interesting question, but I think that whether it brings us up or down depends upon the individual. The individual lets it bring it down, well, that's what's going to happen. If the writer or the person uses it as an assistant tool, then no, it will not bring us down. It will actually bring us up, because it makes it easier to do stuff, writing stuff, getting first drafts, getting ideas. I use it several times a day, usually for brainstorming. I get an idea, I say, flesh this out for me, and it does it. Comes up with amazing ideas for me to explore. So I guess it's up to the individual what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, there's probably two angles that what we're talking about here. So just for clarity for the audience, I think one is about that kind of idea generation where, you may have the traditional, say, writer's block. And, we
Yeah,
all get that. I mean, I write for business, I write business content, I blog, I, do a whole bunch of sort of content writing for clients and that kind of thing. But also then, as you say, it can be, something that can stimulate maybe a brand new sort of, novel kind of idea, literally, that is novel. Is that, do you feel probably currently in the way that sort of AI plays out, do you feel that that is probably a more authentic way of using it than almost sort of thinking of it, it's my co-writer, it's something that's going to
yeah,
write 90% of the article, and then I'll just kind of top it and tail it?
yeah. Let me give you an example of an author friend of mine, how she used AI. She was writing a detective novel, and she had this one scene, and she got the protagonist into a really big heap of trouble, and she couldn't figure out a way to get it out. And she was in the middle of the scene, and she couldn't figure out how to end it. So she went to the AI. She wrote the scene, pasted in the rest of the scene, what she had so far, and she said, "Give me 5 ways to get out of this mess." And the AI did exactly that. And she just looked at it and said, "Okay, I'm taking number 3. That's how I'm getting out of this, finishing the scene." I think that's a great example of how you can use AI to be creative, to brainstorm.
That's a really interesting one. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, well, I know a lot of people listening to and watching this will be thinking, oh, well, I don't use it that way. I have like a title or something, or maybe I've used it to help me create a title. I've then
Yeah,
got it to do the first draft. I've kind of then almost fact checked it and then sort of topped and tailed it. And then that's my article. But actually, as you say, as part of the creative process, it is the get out of jail free card. It is that moment where, if you kind of feel that the direction hasn't quite gone in a way, that could be good, then this is a really, really good ticket to kind of make
yeah,
those improvements at any point, I guess, in the journey.
yes, yeah. I was writing. I had an idea to write an article on them. The title was "Why Writers Need an AI Assistant." So I put the title into AI, and I said, "Give me an outline for this article." Well, the damn thing was a page and a half long. I said, "Jesus, it's not an article; it's a book." And I thought about it, and I said, "Really is it? You can't explain that. It's too complicated to explain in a 500, 600 word article." So the AI corrected what I was doing. I said, "Yeah, I changed some of the outline, but I, I wrote a book on it." That was the title of a short ebook, about 10,000 words. So
Mm.
and I'm still learning new ways to use it.
So when you're using it, then I'm curious. I mean, I have my own way of kind of using ChatGPT is my go-to. I certainly use it in terms of conversationally, and I would say it is conversational because I use the voice facility within there. Did you have a preferred way of interacting as a writer, as an author?
With the AI,
Hmm.
um, no, I kind of developed it on the fly. I was learning as I went along, and um, I I don't have a preferred way of doing it. I just come up to something that happens, and I say, "Oh, this I need AI for this," to give me some clarity. And I kind of just use it ad hoc. I don't have a predefined usage for it. It just pops up. I find something I need some answers, or I need to explain something better. I'll use AI.
So from your side of things then, Hank, I mean, would you see this as like an assistant, or is it a co-writer? Because
It's
that's
an,
quite fundamentally different, isn't it?
it's my writing assistant, my writing buddy. That's how I view it. It's a tool. Uh, it's, I don't know. That's how I guess I explain it. It helps me write. It helps me come up with new ideas. It helps me brainstorm stuff. I get a lot of ideas. Some of them are pretty dumb, but I also this is one way I use it. If something happens, I'm not really working on something, and I'm a little bored. I go into AI and tell it, I'm bored. Give me something to do and make it off the wall kind of things. And it does. It comes off with some surprising things that I possibly could do, most of which I am never going to do. I guess is take a line from one of your stories and engrave it into a piece of wood. Nope, I'm not doing that. Not going to happen. But it does come up with some good ideas that I follow up on them. Some of them are quite good.
Yeah, so that kind of creative spark, I guess, is something that's
Yeah,
really important, isn't it?
yeah,
And I'm sure you've encountered, well, you must have done the whole writer's block kind of concept where you'll have a day and you just think it is not flowing today. But this can then trigger that and almost sort of get you out of that hole.
Actually, I've never had writer's block. The reason is because I'm always writing or working on 3 projects at the same time. One is my main project, it's maybe a book or something. A second project will be something that's really at the end. I'm just wrapping it up. And the third project will be just beginning where I'm getting ideas and stuff. So if I'm on the main project and I get up one morning and I said, I don't feel like working on this. I'll go to one of the other 2 projects and work on that for a day or 2, and then I'll go back to the main project. It works for me. I've never had, lack of things to do. I don't sit there and just stare at the screen. I just bounce around, go to another project.
Well, that's really productive, isn't it? Because I think, there is this kind of idea or thinking probably from outside of your circles that, writers are literally beating themselves up because they can't, sort of either, as you say, finish a particular plot or storyline, or, it's just there are days when the pen isn't and the ink is just not going to flow. But what you're saying is that actually there are ways of kind of dealing with that. And I'm thinking that plays across beautifully in, the content creators in the audience here, because a lot of them will be writing for business and there will be times when they're given a brief and it just is not happening. But what you're saying is if you can kind of balance different styles of writing, different kind of media that you're going to be focusing on, maybe even different channels, then you're going to be available to something at some point.
You're writing a book, it takes a long time to write a book, and you're working on this for a month or a month, and you just get up and say, I don't want to do this today. So you go do something else, do that for a couple of days, and then you go back and you're refreshed and you're ready to go back on the big project.
That's interesting. So would you say then, if kind of the early life Hank, if we could call him that, so sort of think back to the kind of early stages of your career, if AI had been available then, would you find yourself, do you think, being a different writer, different author, different novelist now, or would you still kind of become the same person?
I might have went on different projects, that I completed. I might have had some different ones, but I don't think it would substantially change what I've done or worked on. Again, I use it as a tool, a writing assistant. It's not my main focus. It says I don't get up and say, tell me what I'm going to write today. Tell me what I'm going to do today. I know what I'm going to do. I just use it as a way to get it done faster or better.
So there's kind of like a hierarchy involved here then, is very much you're the boss and this is your assistant. It isn't, it's not co-creation. I think that was the key thing I was trying to get to was how you're using it almost as in a hierarchical sense. It is not my
co-creative. Its name is not going on my books.
Well, again, there's an interesting one. Yeah, because of course, you could argue, or one could argue that because if you are using this as maybe first draft or whatever, then is there a place for the AI at some point in the future to say, hold on a minute, Hank, I created that plot or I created that chapter.
Yeah.
Is there a challenge, do you think, going to happen at some point?
I'm not really sure, Neil. It's possible, but it's changing so fast, it's almost impossible to predict what will happen next month, let alone, in several years from now.
Do you think there will come a point, maybe in the not too distant future, where individuals will have, because it's so easy just to leave it running, isn't it? You can be out, you could be making your breakfast or whatever, and it's already written the first few chapters of a new story or whatever. That individuals will think, hey, I could be a novelist. Well, I say I, but it's me and my AI assistant. I could become a novelist, and it almost then kind of saturates the market with content and storytelling that is actually, as you said, it doesn't have that human spark. It feels very flat, to use your words from earlier. Do you think there is going to be a danger that could happen?
It already is a danger. I've seen several ads on TV or on the web that says, "You have a story idea? Give us the story idea. We'll write a complete novel for you, put a cover on it, and publish it in your name if you give us $1,000." The author, the published author, the only thing he did was come up with the original story idea. This is really unethical use, but I've seen at least 3 ads for this, 3 separate groups that will do this, ranging from $500 to $1,000. And I actually got sucked into buying a book that was written by AI. It was, I forget what I was looking for, but it was terrible. Every chapter started off with almost the exact same wording of the previous chapters. It was terrible. Gave it a really bad review on Amazon. It only cost me 99 cents though, so I didn't get too mad.
But it's the concept, isn't it? It's that principle of it's just clouding the waters, and it feels almost like then that an idea could be that there is this almost human endorsed or human written stamp of approval that goes on certain publications. And I can imagine in the not too distant future, that will almost become a desirable thing, that if something has been written predominantly, if not completely, by a human, you'll have this seal of approval. It feels like we could get to that point very quickly if that story is, is produced at scale, because that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yes. Yeah. My book that I had, the AI toolkit, half that book was produced by AI in the form of queries. I'd write it a query, like, how do I develop a plot? I'd ask the AI to come out with an answer. I'd copy that and put it into the book as an example of how to use AI. But everything the AI wrote is in italics, and all my stuff is in non-italics, so it's just sort of I can tell people, this is my stuff. This is what the AI did. I think you really have to do that in order to establish any kind of credibility. If you're using AI and sticking it into your books and passing it off as your own work, I think it's only a matter of time until you destroy your credibility.
Yeah, and I think maybe then comes the hierarchy that I was talking about a little earlier, where we sort of said, anybody obviously can produce their own, novels or publications or business content, as long as it's almost sort of declared as, okay, this is not authentic human. And then it almost then puts an extra value to human written content then, doesn't it? Because it's kind of like, and in the future, maybe 5-10 years time, it's like, no, I've actually got a book that was completely 100% written by a human, and almost that becomes a collector's piece.
Yeah, it gives you more credibility. It's almost like it's a collector item. Actual human wrote this thing, the whole thing. Imagine that.
It could easily get to that, couldn't it, really? Yes, and again, it's like the movie industry. I can imagine that being a similar thing. Obviously CGI, we've had CGI for decades now, but where a film is completely generated using and with CGI, but with kind of human-esque characters, it will be interesting, just to have actual human characters in it again.
Yeah, same thing. Let's go to this movie. It actually has real actors in it.
So it feels hopeful then. Do you feel hopeful about the future with this? Because a lot of people, as we started off this conversation, are feeling relatively fearful that if they don't jump on board, if they don't get it right. But I'm getting the sense that you do feel really quite hopeful and positive about the future here.
I do. I love it. I keep reading articles about it. It's really getting dark, though. I read a couple of articles recently where some of the AIs are really racially biased, and apparently they're not really sure how to stop that. but it's picking more stuff up. If you write something and get the AI to write something, it becomes part of the database that they use, and it's picking up these racially biased things and it's passing them back on out to as part of their system. And it's the same with hallucinations, what it's called. When the AI can make up some really funny stuff if you don't give it enough writing, enough instructions. But the hallucinations are going into the database and they're getting regurgitated. So there are some real problems coming down the road. And I haven't read where they come up with solutions for this. They're working on it, but it's not anything coming in the near future. So yes, I'm very hopeful of it. I like the thing.
No, it's really interesting, and I think with that kind of ethos and that, it feels like it's a really balanced approach. And I'm just kind of encouraging people to reflect on their own kind of position here, because I think a lot of us have found it so convenient. It's so easy just to think, okay, I've got that task on my list of things to do today out of the way because I've used AI. So it's scalable, it's super efficient, it makes great use of time, but it isn't necessarily always the right thing to do. So I think, Hank, what you're kind of, suggesting everyone does is almost take a look in the mirror and think, is this appropriate for the task I'm doing? Have I got the right kind of balance of human versus AI in the mix here?
Yeah.
And as long as I can sit with myself, is that kind of, it's a very personal thing, isn't it? If you can sit with yourself in terms of that balance, is that the right kind of level, do you feel?
Yeah, I think it's similar to, if you try and pass AI off as your own stuff, that's the same as plagiarizing someone else's work. It's this very similar example. You took some book that somebody else wrote and you took a couple chapters out of it and you put it in your new book. It's you didn't write that. It's the same with the AI. Did you write it or did the AI write it? Oh, it really isn't. It comes down to an ethical question. How much you want to use this stuff and where you're going to draw the line. You're going to pass it off as your own stuff, or you're going to continue to produce your own stuff with the help of the AI. I guess that's what the whole question comes down to. It's ethics. How are you going to use it?
And until, I guess, there are sort of official rules, if ever there are official rules about what is the right kind of balance, it is about just being very, as you say, very ethical and honest with the way that you're using it, reasons why, and as you say, that relationship that you have with it, be it a co-writer or an assistant, and I guess everybody's going to have a slightly different and nuanced answer for that, but that's probably okay as long as you've made some mindful decisions, I guess.
Yeah, it's up to the individual.
Now, I know you've created a lot of content on this. You've been blogging quite prolifically, and you have on your website some various specific areas where people can kind of get further ideas and things. Where should people go if they want to follow up on this conversation?
I guess to Amazon, my copy of a book, the author's what is it? The author's toolkit, AI toolkit, which goes into the experience. It's got about 40 or 45 queries in it. And I demonstrate how to write a query and how useful it would be. You can get these queries out there. You just copy them right out of the book, and probably have to modify them a little bit for your own situation, but it's a very good starting point to learn how to write queries that produce good responses.
Wonderful. So there you go, people. You have an option to take forward and go and see whether or not what you're doing meets Hank's level of authenticity and prompting and kind of working with AI as an assistant rather than as a replacement.
It'd be good for someone who isn't familiar with AI also to get started with it, because it shows you how to write these queries, which is really the secret of using AI.
Absolutely. And if anybody is using this, because a lot of people on the call here are going to be sort of listening and watching this from a business perspective, is there any kind of single top tip that you could give to them? If somebody sat here thinking, Hank speaks a lot of sense, I need to be kind of practicing, what he's preaching here. Is there a single little piece of wisdom or a tip that you could give them to kind of almost take the next step in their journey?
You got to remember that AI is a computer program. So it's garbage in, garbage out. That's an old saying, but it applies to AI also. You really got to be careful what you put into it, and you have to be even more careful of what you do with what it comes out of the computer, out of this AI stuff, because it can get pretty silly at times. You got to fact check it, especially if you give it a kind of vague query. The AI may not. The AI tends to be wordy. I mean, you have to actually tell it to make the response short, or you're going to get thousands of words. And if it doesn't have enough information to write those thousands of words, it'll make crap up. It'll just stick in the stuff, the most outrageous stuff. And if you're just reading, you may go skip right over it. You don't realize that, whoa, where did that come from? But it's interesting. But it really can lie, and it does it. It's a very good liar. It's a convincing liar. The stuff just doesn't pop out in quotes that says, I made this up. You got to figure it out yourself.
So fact checking people, what you put in is what you get out. So be patient and prompt correctly, but definitely get yourself a copy of Hank's book, and you will be well set. And
don't settle for the first query. Go back in and take your query and change a couple of words, and you'll get a completely different response. So play around with the queries until you get the response that you want, that will satisfy your demand or your need.
Brilliant. Hank Quense, thank you so much for your time and energy and passion on this topic. I feel encouraged that AI can be used as a writing assistant. Really appreciate your time today.
Neil, this was fun. I really enjoyed it.